All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Inside Fnatic's Brush podcast edition, where we go a bit more live into what's happening with Fnatic League of Legends. I am very lucky to be joined again by Duckling, where we're going to go through what happened between winter and the upcoming spring split. Now, obviously, a lot has already been said in between. There's been the AMAs and everything, but I thought we'd dive a little bit more into the details, really give what we think about, the shenanigans and the conversation that has been. So first of all, Duckling, how's it been? I know you've been very busy, and how have you seen from your corner of the earth?
Well, I mean, obviously, I thought the split started positively in terms of the fact that the results were all right. The team looked to be growing. I thought, I think week 2 we were really good. I thought Losper has definitely shown some of the craziness, right? He did have some Healy saying about him, which was fun to watch. I think we saw a bit more of Imputus, but then obviously it fell apart very quickly. Our early games never really improved, and they were always relatively weak. Like, we relied on mid to late games, like the win against Na'Vi as well, where it was, late game team fight. I feel like from what you're getting about how things are inside the team, it sounds like it's going okay well, or like pretty well in scrims from how I read into between the lines of what they're saying, and like the mood and mentality. And I had a look through the answers of the AMA as well from on the Fnatic app, and it looks like the players are I want to say pretty happy too, right? Obviously, what they put out to us will be coming through some sort of filter. It's not going to be the direct feeling or some of the frustrations maybe they don't let out, but it does seem like it's a team that's committed to growing together, but obviously disappointed to be this poor in playoffs, and obviously only scraping into playoffs a few weeks in a row where we were just shocking. And I mean, for me, I would have been happy with 4th place, 5th place, but to just lose 0-2 in both the upper and lower bracket, I think is for the standard, even with the lower expectations we had of this roster coming into winter, unacceptable. So I'm happy to see there are some changes, and I'm happy to see it not being in the roster, but more on focusing on providing the right foundations to make them grow, right, and allow that growth to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go, through each of those segments bit by bit, just to come back very briefly on, that winter split. When we compared to our expectations, our first episode at the beginning of the season, where obviously we're quite hopeful, but I think we had a lot of lucidity when it came to our expectations. Is definitely not like going for the trophy, but scaling, showing some improvement, seeing that team gel together. And it felt what we were seeing in the first 2 weeks, right? The first week, obviously a bit rough coming in. Second week looked much more cohesive, and you're like, oh, well, that's quite an impressive and encouraging transformation from week 1 to week 2. I can't wait for week 3, and week 3 was the challenging one. You had Carmine Corp, obviously, that was at that point looking like the best team so far, as G2 was struggling to get back with their current 5, and you had former BDS shifters who should have won more games, but ultimately were choking, but looking like a strong unit as well. And it was like, well, it feels like it's going to be another 2-1 week where the Carmine Corp game is going to be the loss, because they're coming quite strong into the split, and Fnatic still finding himself. And from week 3 onto the playoff, as you mentioned, it was just like a sudden drop. Like, everything that improved in week 2 was completely lost. And I'm still to this day, even after watching the AMA, trying to understand what was going on, because it felt like, Lospa, who had been MVP in week 2, you're like, okay, this guy's coming into shape really very quickly, and we had some expectations for him, and he was, spoken greatly by other pro players. You had obviously Ampiros in the top lane, who managed to show himself some of his carry prowess. Even when the team was not doing so well, he was standing out. And you're like, okay, we're slowly getting there. And it just felt that all the progress that was done within 2 weeks was just scattered away. And I don't know if you felt the same, or if you just felt that there weren't that much improvement, or if you maybe put your finger on something that suddenly made the change from for me the moment where I pointed out, which is the week 2 week 3 transition.
I think probably there's something to do with the fact that other teams read the meta better than us, right? I think we had a few weeks where we were questioning a bit about how we were reading the game, were we making the correct calls, not really focusing much on early game, right? It took all the way until the Vitality series, I believe, to get our first streak of the split, because we very much focused on the mid games, and as teams, figured out the best way to play the game, we seem to still be very adamant in what we were doing in the first few weeks was going to keep playing. And the thing is, maybe we still got better, but we never got to see it because our early game just got exposed too much for us to really still be able to show some of that mid-late game style that we were stronger at. And it felt like individually as well, there were, a few more mishaps. I don't think Vladdy had the best split. I think Imputus had a few down games as well. Lospa, who looked insanely good in week 2, had a rough few weeks as well, where, when you are such an aggressive support, all of a sudden your aggressive plays, if the team isn't on the same page or you're behind, can look very, very stupid, right? Because you might get a one shot or something. And I think maybe that's to do. I, for me, think a coaching staff of only one coach and an assistant, especially when you're in such uncharted territory in terms of having such raw rookies in Lospa and Imputus coming in, I think that was a bit bold. Especially with how advanced League is nowadays, right? It felt like a very small team and didn't feel like they were able to work on enough issues. I think it was also, didn't Grabs come out and say there was a week where Gex was sick as well, so it was basically just him working with the lads, right? And all of a sudden you can't fix all the issues or keep up with all the things because the game is developing at such a rapid pace now. And I mean, if you look at what, for example, Verdant did in the NLC, they had Aragon who, watches every single LPL game and has a great mind for League of Legends. He's their assistant coach. I believe he's looking for, a new job actually right now. But what he was able to bring to them was maybe necessarily he didn't focus on minute details. I don't know exactly what his roles were, but I know he also brought that into the team, right? Keeping up with the meta and trying to be one step ahead of seeing where, the major regions also are heading to try and get a better read, because I feel like we are always, or I want to say, even like we saw it in Worlds last year as well, we are late on the reads. Like, you're questioning what we're doing in drafts. Is this Ezreal Prio really the right thing to do? And maybe they can argue for why they believe what they believe. But I think for too long now, we've been, one step behind on what's the best way to play the game. And even if, I think more people or someone who can have more time, because if you only have 4 eyes and so many issues you need to fix, while you also have to try and keep up with a game that's constantly evolving every 2 weeks, it becomes really, really difficult. And I think maybe that's the biggest challenge, because you can't work on all the issues when you're that few people, right?
Yeah, and that's what really stood out as well, just to go back, obviously, on some of the elements that were shared through the first EMA, which was the staff EMA, which was the live version, was that evident lack of resources, which to me, part of me can understand, but the other part felt like it was really short-sighted, especially with the type of roster we were coming in, which was, compared to the previous iterations, was much more rookie favored, and that that was a choice as well, but it was not sort of accompanied by the necessary resources when it came with staff or level of analysis, especially going into the LEC versus format, which really is, again, one of the worst formats you can ask for. A single round best of ones, you face the team once on the one game, anything can happen. Results are completely skewed. A team that was looking to not make playoffs can suddenly be in playoffs contention. And to me, it was really the worst conditions to sort of build up your rookie, stabilize your meta read, and actually do something. and then just have it snowball into your face come playoffs. And that's really what happened. The sort of result of the misread of the meta going into the playoffs, where I mean, the only way I can sort of resume, or really just summarize, I should say, sorry, this Fnatic team going into their final week is just boring. It's not like even bad. It's just like nothing was happening. Nothing was happening on the map. All the lanes were losing. Razork had no plan to save the lanes. He was getting beaten on scuttle timing, obviously, because none of his side lanes had prio. And he was just one level behind, which meant when it comes to fighting for the first objectives, which is usually your around level 6, this is the whole difference. Hence, lacking the first Drake at the majority of our games, which then when you don't have the early game read, well, the game spirals out of control. And the only sort of silver lining you could see was sometimes in the team fight, despite being behind, they could manage to do something, but even then it was not enough to get back into the game. Like, only in some circumstances that you could see, oh yeah, they're bringing it back, or the enemy team is choking it or something like this. But even then, in the few situations where they were bringing it back, the other teams, I mean, the league, at least so far, is way more competitive than it has been in the previous seasons, in my opinion. You've even the teams that haven't made it into playoffs have had some really good game. I mean, it was this close for, if it was a better Fnatic, G2 ultimately doesn't make playoffs, and it's Los Ratones taking their space. Like, that's how close it was. But in the end, it's quite funny that despite all of that, it's G2 that suddenly had the massive growth, and not within during the playoffs. It's like straight into the playoffs, they looked like the better team as they were going into KC. So it's just for Fnatic, is the other way around, is just downwards and downwards. They're not doing what's necessary from the get-go, and that reflected in the AMA as well, is that the budget issues and so on and so forth. And there's only so much you can understand when people are saying, well, yeah, there's budget issues, but there's a massive pool of analysts that are available in the scene that don't need T1 salaries to start working with you, and especially a specific capacity. And that's why you get Odo Amne coming in. It's like he's a big name, but I'm sure there's something where he comes in to work with Fnatic because he's able to do other projects on the side that bring in some revenue. So he's like, yeah, I don't need to live off being an analyst for Fnatic. I can live off all these other LEC projects and other things, and have a side hustle with Fnatic, and Fnatic budget-wise sort of find themselves.
Yeah, and I think in a grander scheme of things, it's important to think about the financials, right? Esports is a changing environment, and if you're asking me the question if I want to see Fnatic spend stupid money to try and win a championship, try and win the league again next split, or next year, that ultimately puts them at such a financial risk that it doesn't guarantee I can watch a Fnatic in 2 years or 3 years time. My answer will always be, I'd rather just have a Fnatic to watch, right? Because that's the organization I'm a fan of. You have to be cautious. I'm happy we didn't buy out June, because why would you spend 200k in this esports economy on a very good player if he's going on military service in a year? If you're maybe doing a 3-year deal and you're building Fnatic from the ground up again around June, first of all, stupid to let him go in the first reason then for 1 year. You could understand it with Mickey. That's a broader debate. But more the fact is, as I think Khan said as well, they've spent some stupid money in the past, right? They've made the big buyouts. Think about the 2022 roster when that was assembled. It was made to be this brilliant team of, getting Wonder out of G2 just after the G2 dynasty. Obviously, 2021 didn't go that well for G2, but Wonder was still, really good at the days. Getting Rastalk out of Misfits, Humanoid in the mid lane who just won back-to-back championship. These were big buyouts, and they took big financial risk with that in a time where, by the looks of things, from how it sounds from Khan, there was a lot more guaranteed revenue from Riot, or at the very least some sponsors, which is just not the case anymore. And I don't blame them for them having then to be smarter with how they spent the money, because I think we've spent stupid money in the past. I'm just a bit either a bit scared or a bit frightened that we have not been able to get the additional staff in, because as you say, it's not the most expensive part of the puzzle. It's not a 500k buyout. I mean, maybe you just get someone part-time, right? Or, you know, I mentioned Aragon, right? He also does a lot of streaming on the side, and they're obviously covering the LPL. None of the, I don't believe much of the staff in ERLs for top ERL teams makes a full-time living, if any of them do. And there are plenty of good coaches and analysts and assistant coaches or whatnot out there, right? So I think that's something we have a pretty deep pool of in Europe. I've at the very least had some, I've seen competent staff in the NLC at the very least work for pennies. And it's not to say you should be trying and pinch your pennies and underpay someone. More so that adding, you know, an analyst, or I should say, or another assistant coach. If we can't afford that, I mean, that's not the greatest financial risk. It just means the budget might just be tiny if we are struggling that much. Or maybe it's because they want them down in person in Balloon, which obviously increases the cost or whatnot. There's probably something to it, right? But yeah, I think it's smart that we don't spend stupid money anymore. But I really think that when you're then going for a team with 2 rookies for the first time in LEC, Vladi isn't that experienced either. And then, you know, in terms of, I think, mindset, right? When you think of G2, when you come in as a rookie, you can look to your mid lane and you see Caps, the most winning player in LEC history, someone who's getting into the Hall of Fame, right? You've probably got that faith always that even when things look rough, if you can't win with Caps, how can you win? Like, how can you, like, if you can't win with him, you're not gonna be able to win. Right. And you've got the best case scenario just right there. But when the 2 veterans you're relying on is someone who, both of them who've never won anything in their career, maybe it doesn't spur that confidence. And that's not to flag on Upset or Razork for being bad veterans or leaders of the dressing room, whatnot. It's more just to say the confidence and the environment. I can imagine it becomes more shaky if that's what you're leaning on for that extra help, because the coaching staff is trimmed so thin that, you know, who do the rookies then go to for help? It's probably one of those 2, right? Yeah. To get that extra assistance, and I don't think they are equipped for that. And that's not to say they're bad people. I don't think they both seem to be, you know, pretty nice with the team environment. Upset at the very least seems, you know, to be minding more his own business, but Losper seems to be pretty happy playing with him, and the rest of the guys, you know, seem happy with it too. And Razork obviously for years now has seemed as a great personality outside of the game, and, you know, think about how highly June wanted to play with him, right? So nothing to them as people, but, you know, they bear more responsibility when the coaching staff is thin, and that may be dragging them down a bit on their game too, right? Because they have to help out others, and it's not a bad thing to do that. It's I think important to be able to learn from or give some of your information away and help the rookies, but it's just too thin of a coaching staff, and maybe they've had to help too much or something, and maybe again it all just comes back to a bad meta read. But regardless, I'm happy we've got Odoam in. I think it's a great addition, and hopefully we'll see those extra hands and extra eyes make a difference. And I still believe in the 5 players. I think they all showed glimpses of their quality throughout the split at different points, right? Of how if they are all on the same page and ticking together, I think they can all be very dangerous. Lospa had games, Imputas had games, Razork had games, Vladi had a few games as well, and Upset, I mean, is Upset and had some great team fights as well and some good games. So like they all had individual moments throughout the split. We just needed to be more consistent and need to see right steps taken in the right direction.
Yeah, and I find you bring a subject that's quite interesting when it comes to leadership within the team, and Razork specifically. Something stood out to me, not in the League of Legends AMA, but they did a second one that was game-wide, let's say, afterwards, where Kojo, who's now a historic figure within Fnatic, because before taking care of Valorant, he's been on so many titles and been very successful across, if not all of them, majority.
Yeah, he's on the Valorant one right now, right?
Yeah, I mean he's how many years in? I think he said it in the post recently. It's like almost 7 or 8 years. I mean, he's been, as far as I can remember, like he's been part of Fnatic, and something that stood out to me, because there was one question that I thought was very interesting, was obviously Valorant being the most successful title in recent years for Fnatic. It's trying to understand what makes them better, like what secret, formula, to take a known phrase, is working out for them, and that could be different potentially for the others. Is it the game? Is it the context? Is it the pool of players, the budget wise? And obviously they do have someone like Booster who helps quite a bit, bringing in those newer players and really shaping them to the maximum of their potential. And we've seen that across multiple who've had to replace big names, not just on Fnatic, but on an international scale, and do really well. And one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that he said that Razork would speak with Booster on a regular basis to understand what it takes to be a leader, what he does. And I was like, oh, well, that's great to hear. Unfortunately, we're not really seeing that right now, in my opinion. Like, we're still lacking something where we see Razork not to be a sort of copy paste of Booster, because he's really unique in terms of personality, but be the guy that really stands out, and that puts the type of work where you just see him as the guy that's going to lead his team, who can bring them up and really sort of change the mentality. And he can be that to a certain extent. I feel like he's great, especially to do that with Korean players specifically. Like, he's like a Korean ambassador. I feel like when you look at Noah and June when they joined in, I feel like he really managed to do that. But I'm not feeling the same impact with Lospa and Mempiros. Lospa, I feel, is a bit obviously closer with Upset, and has said in the app AMA that they've been working quite a bit on duo queues and working on the matchup, which that's a great signal to me. And but at the same time, he's very close to Vladdy because they travel together to the office. Obviously, Empiros being a former mate of Vladdy, I guess that the connection goes here. But I don't feel like Razork is more of that centerpiece where he's the glue, where Booster is definitely, and everyone considers him as the ultimate IGL because he's the guy that works endlessly with the coach, with Milan, to come up with the strats and come up with the next players and do this and do that with the meta. I don't think Razork is staying late with grabs and gags to sort of say what can I do better, what how can I be a better leader, working on strats. I think he just works as hard obviously as the other people, but doesn't do that sort of plus one that would be needed if he really wants to sort of reflect what Booster does. And I will say, I think it's obviously Razork's ultimate year within the team. It's a bit disappointing. I was really hoping that this sort of new wave of rookies would really shine a light on him to say, okay, this is what he's capable of. He's free from the shackles of humanoid, and maybe Oscar, who, from what was said by Grabs, was not putting enough working or even communicating enough in terms of what he was needing to be successful in the Rift. And obviously the shift is complete here with a team that speaks more across the board from what Grab said. And I feel like that's what making the base for this team to still be successful going into the rest of the year, despite the very complicated LEC versus split. But just to go back on Razork, I feel like he needs to be the full package. If that's going to be his ultimate year, either on Fnatic or just professionally, he needs to go out on a bang. And right now, I feel like he's working hard, but we still need much more from him. We need him to really put himself forward to be like that Caps, where maybe he's doing those crazy plays, but you can turn to him and you can feel leader. The guy's going to carry you. A bit like Elyoya does with Mad Lions Koi, where it's like, yeah. I mean, Elyoya is probably one of the best junglers right now, but even then, it's when you hear him and the voice comes, he's really the guy who carries his team and shakes them up when things aren't going well, and people. I feel like he really manages to bring his team together and sort of pull through in complicated moments. I don't know if you have sort of the same aspect with Razorg, or if it's maybe on a different player on the roster.
I think obviously the roles are different, right? When I think of Valorant, I think obviously Boaster's an insanely good leader, right? That's the reason he's one of the GOAT IGLs of Valorant, and you see how he's been able to adapt with losing, Leo, now losing Chronicle, Vikai coming in, they still look good, obviously missing out on Santiago just barely, being reverse sweep by Gentlemates, and then obviously disappointingly losing 3-0 to Liquid. But I think he adds, first of all, he's obviously, had some great results. I think back to the lock-in tournament, almost being reverse swept, then coming back on Icebox. No, I don't believe the map is called, I think it's called Icebox. I don't play much Valorant. Yeah. But, that map where they made the insane comeback in Brazil, and then obviously carrying them to so many finals, obviously, sadly, just like Fnatic doing League, lose a lot of finals as well. Thinking back to the champions last year against NRG. What I'm thinking is the roles are different, right? When I think Counter-Strike, I think Valorant, you have a designated IGL whose job it is to come up with the strategies alongside the coach and make those decisive decisions. I don't think it's as clear cut in League, obviously. And I think that makes a bit of a difference. I think Razorg does still seem very important for the vibes in the team, even the small glimpses we've only been given this year. I still think Fnatic social media could do a better job at getting us closer to the new team, the players, because I think they all seem very likable, to be honest. Vladi and Razorg seem to be getting along great, and Pudas is lovely. Same for Losper, right? And Upset seems to be gelling better with these guys in the glimpses we've had. I'd love to see more if they did that and showed us more behind the scenes. But I think he's a bit of a pressure valve outside the games by the looks of things. Even when things get rough, he seems to be the one who's trying to take that responsibility. If I recall back to the Na'Vi game as well, when they made that big comeback, it was like, guys, it's a really good win. It's good we came back, but holy fucking shit, we suck at this. Yeah. We have a lot to work on still. And I think that's pretty good leadership of, credit for the game here, guys. It's incredible we came back from nearly 10k down, but we need to make sure we don't have to come back from that situation in another time, right? And I think what I want to lead this into is the fact that I'm cautiously optimistic for Spring Split, because I also think Winter Split essentially could only go wrong, even with lower expectations. When you come from being, a team that just qualified for Worlds and made top 4 in every single split, and the year before that made basically every final, and you're Fnatic, the expectations will be high. And for the first, now we had rookies. We didn't have the greatest coaching staff. It was a rough split in terms of the format as well, right? Very intense with all these single round robin best of ones. A lot could go wrong. And now you've had that disappointment. It can't get much worse than this. So, you finished 8th. You did horribly in playoffs. Now you've gotten a great addition, I think we can all agree on, to the coaching staff. You've had some time to work on the game and renewed vision, hopefully, with the addition of Odoamne and the reflections from Winter Split, let's put it like that. And now when you're coming into spring, I think the pressure is low on you, because now the barrier or the height you need to reach for success is just growth, and you just need to be better than top 8. Now there's only 10 teams. You just have to be able to beat the bottom teams, right? Essentially, obviously with Fnatic you'll always have higher standards, but I think it's much easier for these guys to walk in without feeling too much pressure this time. Now Imputus has been on the stage before, Losper's been there for a split before as well, and I think that can help, because they're not playing with as much pressure. They have better background staff around them with hopefully a more solid foundation, and I hope that's enough to see improvements. And I think I'm hoping for a top 4. I think would be good for spring, and most importantly, just week on week improvements. But yeah, and I think hopefully Razorg will step up too, and I believe he's doing an alright job in the leadership. It's more, I just don't think he breeds that same in-game confidence when things goes wrong like Caps, right? Look to your right, you have Caps in your mid, and it's just like with Faker, right, at international tournaments. Yeah. I've got Faker, I'm okay, I've got Caps, we can still win this. And even if I think, Razorg has shown incredible highs in his time at Fnatic for periods, right, 2024 for example, without having someone who's just won so much and has that, calmness about him in terms of, when you have him by your side, you can win anything. I think it's just you don't get that extra. I kind of want to say aura points or whatever you want to call it, but extra confidence in the team just because they have you on the team, if I can say it like that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and it's a good point you put forward on the fact that there was those moments in voice cons, but we have been missing so the latter parts of playoffs in terms of content. What I liked, speaking of content, was that obviously they've restructured some of the content they were putting forward. They have been a bit more diligent, I feel like, in trying to be I would say more regular on bringing the fun content and the sort of legends in action. They don't really call it that, but what I enjoyed was that they were putting forward the conversations that they were having after the game, and the fact that they were confronting each other, and you could see the difference already between this team and the team before, where you really had maybe one or two people who were speaking their mind and actually developing their thoughts, and others that were just shrugging and saying, well, yeah, it was a bad game, nothing much, and people are saying their thoughts, say, yeah, I'm struggling with this, I don't understand why this is going on, blah blah blah. Upset obviously being the guy that he's always speaking the most, but I feel like the other players, especially Lospa, were seeing what was going wrong and giving themselves objectives or homework for the next time, and saying, oh yeah, we sucked on laning phase, so I will be focusing on X and Y. And I feel like, again, it's like we kind of suck, but there's something to it. They're really trying. They haven't given up, even though nothing is looking good right now. They're still trying their hardest, and it's how does that transition, into that sort of in between split, like from what Anissa or Geomancy is telling us, spirits are still high, so that's good to hear. They came back a few weeks ago, I believe, from their break. They're doing some workshops. Obviously, Richard's still helping on the performance side of things. Really curious to see, obviously, how Odoamne fits into this puzzle. He has shared a little bit on the AMA what he was bringing in, and obviously what Grabs has said continuously was what he's expecting on an analyst to sort of be the guy that takes on subjects where Grabs and Gax could sort of give him the keys and say, okay, you're gonna do a workshop on laning phase or early game or objective control, and he's gonna master this. And I've always been a big proponent of getting former players as coaches or assistant coach. I think we've had a good scale of seeing successful success stories, I should say, in general. You've had Mithy and Nuke Duck with FlyQuest, who've been a great duo. You've had Soaz with NRG. You have what's his name, Memento, who's joined G2 as well, and Odoamne had a small stint with Los Ratones, where I do feel there was a transformation of Los Ratones, the sort of raw version of them, and Los Ratones with Odoamne, where there was still some craziness to Los Ratones, but they felt more competitive, and even when they were behind, they were still bringing back games from nowhere. So hopefully Odoamne can apply some of that magic. I'm just a little bit curious how much time he's giving to Fnatic, seeing he has LEC, and I've just seen today that he's doing the rebirth of Euphoria with LEC podcasts. So hopefully that's not taking too much on his time with Fnatic, and I hope Grabs is happy with the time that Odoamne is able to allocate to the team. But obviously it's going to take it's going to be a slow progress to see how the new approach are going to fit into the team, how much they're going to stick, how much the players are going to adhere also to it, because if we have a very chatty 5 core, how much are they able to bring in someone like Odoamne, who is a young retired player as well. It's not like Soaz, who's retired quite some bit and really considered as a veteran's veteran now. I don't know how much someone like Razork, who has played against Odoamne, how the psychological fact of accepting someone who you've played against now is coaching you. And I'm very curious on that relationship as well. But I believe that the first game is against Giant X, who've been taunting us on the fact that we are placed higher than them on the leaderboards, and who've done a little bit better than previous seasons. They were doing 5th last year, and they did 4th.
They finally got into the top 4, right?
Yeah,
but then again, I think
done +1.
and I think that kind of speaks to the competitiveness, right? Because in winter, you come in as a Fnatic with essentially, I want to say, a brand new teams at the very least approach from how they spoke on things. And you had Giant X, who had a almost top 4 team if it wasn't for Fnatic last year, keeping the exact same team. G2 keeping the exact same team. MKOI keeping the exact same team. I want to say Carmine Corp making some upgrades, or at the very least, I think Busio was definitely an upgrade, and then Kiyahu or Yahoo or whatever you pronounce him. I think he's done pretty well. But I think overall they were a stronger team than last year. That's 4 teams already who I think Fnatic were behind in early split power rankings. So I mean, I think being able to get top 4 in winter would have been great. Top 5 or something would have been acceptable. Top 5, top 6. But it was more to see us lose to teams like Shifters, again, the lack of growth we saw. Felt like we were in standstill, and again late on the meta reads, and teams just progressed so much quicker than us, right? That's what was really a bit deflating, especially with all the hope you got in week 2, because you saw the new rookie stepping up. I think Losper looked incredible that week. I think I saw one I was at Cheap Esports doing a team of the week or something as well, right? A genuinely insanely good week from him. Even if the early game wasn't perfect, you're like, okay, the mid game's pretty good. We were able to make comebacks as well. The fight seems to be there. But yeah, I think this team has a lot more to offer, and hopefully Odoamne will provide that foundation and help. I think the way he spoke about it being the connecting factor between the players and the coaches as well, in terms of the fact that he has, very recently been a top tier European pro player, right? Going to Worlds as the first seed just 4 years ago, and obviously playing a bit after that as well. So hopefully that will be a good connection and just be that final edge that we need. And yeah, I mean, again, I'm feeling cautiously optimistic, but maybe that's just because I don't think it can get much worse, and I think there's still plenty of potential in this roster. Sure. I understand the thought process of putting them together, but I think it's also about accepting that we are a different Fnatic than we were 4 or 5 years ago, due to how the esports landscape now looks. In terms of the monetization that comes in and the revenue, right? You can see it in almost all of esports across multiple industries. I mean, it's tough out there. Gambling sponsors are being allowed in, and even if you don't like that, it seems to be absolutely necessary to keep the lights on in many cases. ERLs in general are not making money. I mean, it's not been a great few years for League of Legends esports in terms of revenue growth, even if the numbers for viewership have been incredible. And we've had some great storylines to follow, and I've enjoyed following it. The money just hasn't necessarily followed, so we have to accept Fnatic in a different situation, and I think I'm happy to see them realize that and not just make headless or senseless decisions like buying out June would have been for 200k when he would be going on military duty in a year. So I'm happy with that. I think I feel okay with the leadership we have right now, and I am happy that they're doing these AMAs so that we can understand their views, even if we don't agree with every decision. It does help to accept and give more of a chance, because again, I still believe in the prospects of this team, and I really want to see some of these guys redeem themselves, right, with everything that happened with Vladi and KC in 2025. Razork never winning anything with Fnatic as now the franchise player, Upset and 10th place man or potential man or whatever you want to call him with those memes. like all of these players I really want to see redeem themselves, and with Fnatic as well, haven't won since in 2018. I think this is a roster more than anyone I would love to see succeed and get a title under their belt, not only for the org, but the individuals who've committed so much to this game and maybe treated too harshly, even by us, right? With some of the frustrations we need to let out every now and then as fans. And obviously sending death threats to players or anything like that, absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely. Have a look at yourself. Why would you be doing that? But frustration's definitely been there, even from the more reasonable fans, right? And we've all felt frustrated at how things have been for Fnatic. So yeah, again, just summarize. Cautiously optimistic and happy to see these AMAs being held.
Yeah, and that's what I would say. It's a bit of a situation of prove the haters wrong at the end of the day, and I feel like a bit like you. The AMA was much needed. The pressure cooker was really whistling here, and I think you at some point you have to confront the fan. You gotta say, guys, it sucked, and that's what it is. And I was a strong believer that fans will support and be behind the staff if they're or I should say upper management, if they are willing to recognize their shortcomings. They come to you and say, yeah, we saw we haven't been there where we wanted. We're deeply sorry, and we have a clear plan going forward. They're gonna be, yeah, okay, that works, but you have to come forward. You have to structure this, and obviously you can only answer as many questions on the AMA that's an hour long for both versions. So it's good that they also extended it to the players as well. It's also true that Fnatic is a very old org, one of the rare orgs to be over 20 years old, and with that comes some budget and financial realities that other younger orgs don't have to face yet. So they're at different tempo, and as you mentioned, esports and Riot Games definitely sending signals that there is a struggle, where they're not going to be using the studio as much, or at least opening it to the public. And that's not just for League of Legends, for Valorant as well. They're opening without an audience, so that's a bit concerning. I don't know.
It's a cost-cutting exercise, right?
Yeah.
Like, playing behind closed doors, all of a sudden you don't need as many security guards, you don't need the concession stands or anything. And I remember when I went down there in 18, 19, 20, the tickets were piss cheap. It was like 10 euros to go in and watch the LEC, right? It was phenomenal. Loved it. But how's that a functional business when what they're making is 150 euros from the 150 people who can go in the studio? And then maybe you spend 10 quid or something as well on concessions. That's 300 euros for they make on an entire studio day, and how much wage do they pay out in keeping the lights on and everything.
Exactly.
So it's a cost cutting. It's very clear, and with how Saudi's heading into esports as well, it's clear there's a need for more money in the scene to help these orgs function, and I assume that's why Riot is allowing to lose their grasp on all the tournaments, because the Saudis are paying a huge fund, and that's just the reality of things, and it's how esports is heading. That's why they're opening up for these gambling sponsors as well, because money is tight. Money is very much tight in esports, and especially in League of Legends esports, unless you're the top orgs. And Fnatic, no matter how hard it is to face it, we aren't the top org of Europe, and we haven't been for a long while now. And it can be seen in the sponsors and the income, and spending stupidly or making these financial risks in years of the past that didn't pay off definitely doesn't help the situation either. So yeah, it's a tough spot, but yeah, cautiously optimistic for spring. I like this team of players we have. I like their personalities from what we can see of them, and I'm excited to get to see them again, and hopefully see the progression of a successful split, getting top 5, getting top 4, and if we could make a playoffs run, anything can happen, right? If you make it into playoffs and get 1 or 2 wins, maybe the team starts heating up and you do a G2, and or at the very least something where you could make it to MSI, or we have the Esports World Cup qualifier as well. Making it there, that's a pretty sizable chunk of tournament revenue maybe as well. Who knows? Hopefully we just step up and get back near the top at the very least, so we're in that mix of top top teams, even if it isn't the top teams, just a top team at the very least.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a mix of both. The fact we're going to have the new format, or the most common format, which is best of 3. So they'll have more games under their belts as well, more champions to practice. So Lospa won't be on Alistar duty 90% of the time, and trying to get as close as an international tournament, or to get some international experience. I think, when you're a rookie, it's some of the best stuff you can taste, because you already have some level of competition that you're sort of discovering at a tier 1 level. But I feel like for most of the rookies who've gone through the international stage, something's clicked. It really gave them a different perspective on how they approach the game, how they approach their training, and scrims and such. And I'm like you, I'm keeping that hope up. I definitely like the vibe as well. I think we have those hard working players. The result maybe haven't shown yet, and a lot of the fan base somehow has already turned and decided that those are bad picks. And you always pay the musicians at the end, and if you're not willing to give the growth, I was already seeing people saying, oh, you have to change such and such, and that would have been such an admission of defeat, saying, well, we've given up on the project because we're already changing the pieces on the checkers. And I'm not surprised, but I'm also relieved that no changes have been made, and instead we've reinforced the elements that were missing, which was staff wise. Now it's all about seeing if they get proven wrong and we get proven correct, that it was the staff that needed adding, that it wasn't the players. And we'll see how the year goes, and if in the end it's just a year of construction and there's progress, but there'll still be more changes to be done to really have something that's working out, then so be it. There's only so much you can do and shout at the top of your lungs to happen. In the end, it's in between the hands of the players, the staff, and Fnatic as a whole. So I'm looking forward to the first games. Even is it going to be online or on stage? I can't remember.
I think it's going to be on stage, right? It's one of the first. I think we're playing on the opening day. Is it not actually the opening game or something?
Could be it.
I just saw Fnatic post that is 3 days until the first game, and that's on Saturday. No, when it starts. Is it Saturday? Yeah. So that should have a studio crowd.
Okay. So that's good. They'll have some fans cheering them on. So I guess we'll see. It would be a great surprise to already see them sort of click straight away. I think GX is a good opponent to start with. Not too hard, not too easy either. Just middle of the pack. What we need to sort of start well, not be in a situation of getting completely stomped. Taking G2, coming back from a very strong first stand tournament, but instead going with GX, who their bot lane has been their star. I think Lotta's not been too bad either, but I think it'll be great going into the split.
Yeah, it's a team where as well, if we have a good best of 3 against them, then you can kind of say, okay, we can be in the position we want to be at the end of the season. Obviously, we beat them in a best of 1, but beating them in a best of 3 would be a lot nicer, especially considering they did end up as the 4th place team in winter. I think it'll be a decent game, and I'm very excited. I think so many teams have had a long break now. It feels like we haven't not played in like a month or something.
Oh,
it's been ages, right?
Half at least.
A month and a half, because we got out so quickly.
It took at least 2-3 weeks before first stand started, and first stand was very, very compact, because when they announced the beginning of the new split, first stand still hadn't started. There was only maybe less than a month before the new split started, and there was like, wait, first stand still hasn't started, like how many games are they going to play? And in the end it was like within a week or so first stand was just done. So it's fine. It'll just be a bit of jet lag for the G2 players, but I've seen other teams get back together, start practicing, and the bot lane again has been grinding super hard. I believe they're combined. Last time I checked, they were over the 3,000 LP. So they're pretty much sharing 50-50 on that. So that's good. Definitely upset. I think was not happy with the results. As he's definitely the one who's hardest on himself, I think, out of all the players. And Lospa is very much willing to improve and listen. I don't know if he necessarily sees a mentor within Upset, but I think he sees a guy who's structured, who knows what he wants, and who's able to communicate it and really make the most out of Lospa. And I think that's great, because you can have some cases where it completely rejects. It's like they're working together because they're under contract, but there's no extra effort that's really done. Upset, I think, is willing no matter what to do what's needed to be successful. And I also do feel he sees the potential within Lospa. I'll be more cautious, I think, on seeing how Vladdy is doing, because one of my biggest surprises was definitely Vladdy struggling on some of the matchups, and just feeling a real shadow of himself compared to what we expect from him. And I really hope, again, for the same reasons of just shutting up the haters, that he can really improve on that fact.
I also didn't think he was set up for success much, though. I think, again, like with the draft, right, like the Talia, I think we overused that way too much. We very much relied on these roaming mid laners for too long. But I mean, I'm just having a look now at the LP, right? I mean, I see the highest LEC teams I'm seeing here on DPM is what, 10,000 LP combined. And yeah, I mean, and yeah, that's G2. Fair play to them. They have 10,700 LP, but Fnatic is just around that with 9,950. Carmine Corp's got 10,200, and I mean, teams like Heretics have 9,800. But my main point more is, it's a team that's grinding, and many LEC teams have around the same amount of LP, but it's a team that's playing actively, right? You can see they're putting in the effort outside of scrims, and I mean, considering the fact that none of them have played a solo queue game for almost 20 hours, I think it's fair to say they've probably had a productive day together of scrims and grinding hard. So yeah, I mean, the solo queue seems to be there. Obviously, LP is now insanely inflated, or what's ever happening with those games. So I just think the LP numbers in general look insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, hopefully these players step up. Upset can be one of the best AD carries in the league. Vladdy can be one of the best mids. Losp has shown glimpses of brilliance in spring or winter rather. Rashok, we know what he can do. And Pudas, we saw a few games when he got on a few more comfortable champions and got prioritized a bit more in draft as well. And he was someone who I said before the start of the split he needed time to grow, because I think he can definitely be LEC level, but he just needs a bit of time. And I think we saw that a bit in winter as well, right? So now, I think that's some of my final thoughts. I'm excited. I can't wait to get going again. And as long as we improve a decent amount on winter in terms of results and a massive amount in terms of gameplay, I'm happy. If we finish 6th or 5th and we look 10 times better than winter, that's okay for me, because I'm not expecting us to go to MSI, and then hopefully we can take it from there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll say the word of spring split will be growth, under maybe the banner of the, I don't know if you saw, they did the painting, which was something like improve your early game or die trying. Like they did a little painting with like spray tags or things like with a skull crab, and I think that's amazing. That I don't know if they're hanging it at the top of their scrim room as a sort of motto to follow, to say, guys, we have to win the early game, and this you have to sort of focus on that and make it your Northern Star. But I like the mindset. I like that they're coming with a sort of comedic approach to it, to say this is what we have to focus on. And yeah, I think the excitement stays, but obviously with, as you mentioned, a lot of cautiousness, and I think we'll keep it at that. Again, thank you very much, Duckling, for joining me on another podcast episode. Thank you for anyone that's watched it live or that will be watching on the VOD. Tune in into Fnatic games this weekend, and until then, always Fnatic. Thank you, guys. See ya.
Thank you.